Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my channel? Thank you so much. I don't know if I'm telling this story for sympathy, forgiveness, or maybe just to let it out of my system. Whatever the reason, I'm not proud of what I did and I don't expect anyone to understand, but I need to say it even if just once. My name is Ma. I was 34 when it happened. I had been married to Adrian for 9 years. We lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone else, and rumours travelled faster than the wind. From the outside, my life probably looked stable, comfortable, home, decent income, a husband who never missed dinner, but from the inside, things were different. And it took me a long time to admit that Adrian wasn't a bad man. He never raised his voice or his hand. He was steady and reliable, but that was all. It was like living with a co-worker or a roommate. We had the same conversations every day. How was work? What's for dinner? Did you take the trash out? There were no surprises, no curiosity, and slowly I became invisible. In my own marriage, I had started working part-time at a local bookstore. It wasn't about the money, I just needed something to fill my days. That's where I first started seeing Emil regularly. He was Adrian's childhood friend. They had known each other since school and still saw each other now. And then Emil was nothing like Adrian. He was spontaneous, funny in a quiet way, and he noticed things like when I changed my hair or when I seemed tired. The first time Emil came into the shop, it wasn't unusual. He came in looking for a book about vintage motorcycles. We talked for a few minutes, mostly about the book, but what I remember most is that he asked me how I was not the way people ask out of politeness, but like he actually wanted to know. That question asked sincerely stayed with me all day. Over the next few weeks, he stopped by more often, always with a new excuse. A book he wanted, a gift he needed to buy, sometimes just a coffee from the cafe next door. And slowly we talked more. Nothing dramatic, just small moments. But those moments were what I'd been missing. I began to feel seen again. And I didn't realise how much I had needed that I didn't tell Adrian that Emil was coming by so often. Not because I was hiding anything. At least not yet. But because I knew he wouldn't understand. He would think it was strange or inappropriate. Maybe it was, but to me it felt like breathing again after holding my breath for years. One Thursday afternoon, it was raining hard. The kind of rain that soaks you through no matter what you're wearing. Emil came in dripping wet, holding a bag with a plastic-wrapped novel inside. I laughed and told him he looked like a drowned cat. He smiled and said, "I came for the book, but also the company." That was the first time I felt it. A pull. I didn't want to name it, and I knew I had to be careful. I told myself it was harmless. I was just lonely. I hadn't crossed any lines. I wasn't doing anything wrong. But of course, I was maybe not in action yet, but in heart. Things at home got colder. Adrian was more distracted than usual. He spent his evenings watching television, scrolling through his phone, answering work emails even when he didn't have to. I tried starting conversations. I even asked if we could take a weekend trip somewhere, just the two of us. He nodded vaguely and said, "We planned something soon, but we never did." I started writing in a notebook. Things I wanted to say, but couldn't. I wrote about my loneliness, my guilt, my confusion, and slowly I found Emil's name showing up in those pages more often than I cared to admit. One evening, after a particularly long day, I came home to find Emil's voice in my head again. He had said something earlier at the store that I couldn't forget. I had mentioned I used to paint before I got married, and he asked why I stopped. I had no good answer. I didn't even know. That question haunted me all day. That night after Adrian had gone to sleep, I opened the hallway closet and pulled out a dusty box of old art supplies. I sat at the kitchen table and started to draw again. My hands were clumsy, but it felt like meeting a part of myself I had forgotten. Existed, I wanted to tell someone, and I didn't want it to be Adrian. The next time I saw Emil, I told him I started drawing again. He looked genuinely happy. "That's great," he said. "You should never stop doing the things that make you feel alive." That word alive made something twist inside me, and I realized just how long I had been numb. I began to feel like I was living two lives. One with Adrian, predictable and quiet. A house filled with polite silence, and another in brief moments, with Emil passing glances, short conversations, memories of laughter that stayed with me longer than they should have. One Friday afternoon, Emil waited until no one else was in the shop. He handed me a wrapped notebook. "This is for your sketches," he said. "Thought you deserved a clean start." It was a beautiful leather journal, untouched. I should have refused it, but I didn't. I thanked him, and for a moment our hands touched just briefly, but enough to make my heart thump like I'd run a marathon. That weekend, Adrian and I barely spoke. I watched him fall asleep on the couch, remote in hand, while I sat beside him sketching in the notebook Emil had given me. Every page I filled felt like a secret, and every secret made me feel more distant from my husband. One morning, I found Emil waiting outside the shop before I opened. He had coffee in his hands and a nervous look on his face. "Can we talk?" he asked. I hesitated. Everything in me told me not to go down this road, but I nodded. We sat in the back room, just 2 chairs and a small table between us. He looked at me for a long time before speaking. "I think about you more than I should," he said quietly. "And I know it's wrong. Adrian's my friend. You're married, but I can't pretend I don't care about you." My heart was racing. I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to tell him to stop, to never say those words again. But the other part, the lonely, neglected part, wanted to hear it all. I didn't speak. I just looked at him. And in that silence, so much passed between us. That was the moment the line blurred. We didn't touch, we didn't kiss, but something shifted. And from that day on, I knew things could never go back to the way they were. After that day in the back room, I couldn't look at Emil the same way again. And worse, I couldn't look at myself the same way either. Every interaction with him started to carry weight. Even a simple hello felt loaded. I found myself looking forward to his visits more than I should have. And when he didn't come for a few days, I felt restless, like something important was missing. I told myself I was just being dramatic, that it was just a harmless crush. But deep down, I knew it was something more dangerous. At home, Adriana didn't notice the change in me. Or if he did, he didn't say anything. I had always been the one to fill the silence to keep things moving. But now I didn't try as hard. I cooked dinner, asked him about work, nodded through his short answers, then escaped to my notebook as soon as I could. I started drawing M's face without even realizing it. I sketched his eyes, his smile, the way his hair fell across his forehead. Then I'd rip the page out and throw it away, ashamed of myself. But the next night, I'd do it again. One afternoon, we closed the store early for maintenance work. Emil offered to help move a few boxes. It was just the two of us in the back. The sound of rain against the windows and the smell of dust and old paper in the air. I was lifting a heavy stack when he stepped in to take it from me, and our hands touched again. This time, neither of us pulled away. I don't know how long we stood there just staring at each other. I remember feeling everything and nothing at once. Fear, guilt, longing. Then I stepped back. "This is wrong," I said softly. "I know," he replied. We didn't say anything else. He helped me finish moving the boxes, and then he left without another word. But something had shifted again, and this time I wasn't sure we could undo it. That night, I sat on the couch, while Adrian watched a crime show. He didn't ask how my day was. He didn't notice how quiet I was. I looked at him, really looked, and felt a strange sadness. Not anger, not hate, just sadness. I remembered the man I had married, the one who used to bring me flowers, just because who once drove 6 hours in the rain, just to see me for one night when we were dating, and I wondered where that man had gone. The next day, Emil didn't come by, or the next. I felt his absence like a cold draft in the room. I tried to distract myself. I rearranged shelves, cleaned the entire back office. I offered to cover a co-worker's weekend shift, but nothing helped. Then, late one Sunday evening, I got a message, just one sentence. "Are you okay?" It was from Emil. I stared at it for a long time. I could have ignored it. I should have. But I replied, "I don't know." He didn't respond immediately. I sat there, my phone in my hand, wondering what I was doing. Then, the screen lit up again. "Do you want to talk?" I said, "Yes." We met in the parking lot behind the bookstore. It was nearly 9 p.m. and the street was empty. We sat in his car window, slightly cracked the radio playing low. Neither of us knew how to start. "I've been trying to stay away," he said finally. "But I keep thinking about you." "I think about you too," I whispered. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't dramatic. It was just two people sitting in a car, scared of their own feelings. We talked for a long time about life, about love, about feeling stuck. Emil said he'd always thought I was different. Even back when I first married Adrian, he said he didn't want to be the reason for something falling apart. And I said, I didn't want to be someone who hurt others, but we had already crossed an invisible line. We knew it, and yet neither of us could walk away. After that night, we started meeting more often. Never at home, never anywhere public, always quiet, always careful. We told ourselves we were just talking, just trying to understand things. But feelings don't come with labels or warnings, they just grow. I found myself laughing again, thinking again, feeling again. Emil challenged me, made me think differently, reminded me of who I used to be. And slowly, the guilt I carried started to dull, replaced by something I didn't expect: hope. But hope is dangerous when it's built on secrets. One evening, Adrian surprised me. He brought home flowers. White lies my favourite. I hadn't mentioned them in years. I thought we could go out this weekend, he said, just the two of us. Maybe that lake you liked, I didn't know what to say. I stared at the flowers like they were something foreign. I miss you, Ma, he added quietly. It was the first time he'd said anything like that in a long time, and it broke something in me. I spent that night pacing the hallway, unsure of what to do. I had built this secret part of my life without ever thinking what would happen if the truth collided with it. I never planned to hurt anyone. I never thought it would go this far. The next day, I told Emil we needed to stop, that Adrian was trying, that maybe things could change. Emil nodded, but his eyes were heavy. I understand, he said, but be honest with yourself. Don't stay just because it's easier than leaving. I didn't respond, I just walked away. For a few days, I tried. I smiled more at home. I told Adrian about my day. We watched a movie together, even went for a walk around the neighbourhood like we used to. But the distance between us wasn't just emotional. It had become part of the foundation. And every time I looked at, I felt like a stranger in my own life. One night, I found the notebook Emil had given me. I hadn't touched it in weeks. I opened it to the first blank page and began to write, not sketches this time, but words. My thoughts, my feelings, everything I had held in. I wrote for hours, and when I finished, I realised I had written something like a confession. Not just to Emil or Adrian, but to myself. I didn't know what the next step was. I didn't know if I would stay or leave, if Adrian and I could rebuild, or if the damage had already gone too deep. But I knew I couldn't keep pretending anymore. The truth was coming whether I liked it or not. A few days after I poured my truth into that notebook, I sat at the kitchen table with Adrian and placed it in front of him. He looked at it like it was a gift he hadn't expected, or maybe a letter from someone he no longer knew. "I need you to read this," I said quietly. "Not now, but soon?" "It's everything I haven't said." He didn't ask questions. He didn't get angry, he just nodded and took it. I went for a walk while he read it. My hands were cold even in my jacket pockets, and I kept replaying every word I had written. I had talked about the emptiness, the distance between us. And yes, I wrote about Emil not in detail, not to hurt him, but enough for him to understand how far things had gone and how lost I had felt. When I returned home, Adrian was still at the table. The notebook was closed, and he sat with his head in his hands. "I wish you had told me sooner," he said, his voice raw. I didn't know how to respond. He nodded slowly. "I've been gone too, haven't I? Not physically, but in every other way." I sat across from him. "Yes, but I let it happen. I stopped trying. I stopped hoping." There was a long silence between us. "Not bitter, just honest. I can't pretend this didn't happen," he finally said. "But I don't want to lose you." Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Then, we need to rebuild from nothing. Not the past, just the truth. The next few weeks were the most difficult and most honest of our lives. Adrian didn't ask me to erase Emil from my memory. He didn't shame me or raise his voice. He just asked questions, hard ones, painful ones, and I answered all of them with the same honesty I had avoided for so long. I told Emil we couldn't talk anymore. Not because I didn't care, but because if I was going to fight for my marriage, I had to give it everything. He understood. He didn't beg or plead. He just said, "You deserve peace. Maya, I hope you find it." I cried after that call, not because I regretted anything, but because I knew it was goodbye. He had entered my life like a spark, and while that light had warmed me when I felt cold, it wasn't mine to keep. Adrian and I started therapy together. For the first time, we sat in a room where someone helped us say what we buried for years. We learned things about each other that we should have learned a decade ago. I realised how often I had silenced my own needs to keep peace. He realised how often he had retreated, assuming silence was the same as stability. It wasn't easy. We had nights where we slept apart, arguments that left us emotionally drained. But we also had breakthroughs. We rediscovered little joys, laughing over coffee, cooking together, sitting on the porch without filling the silence. Slowly, something real began to grow between us again. I don't believe in fairy tales anymore. Life doesn't work that way. But I believe in second chances earned, not given. I believe in choosing someone every day, not just on the day you say your vows. I believe love doesn't always look the way you expect. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's messy, and sometimes it asks you to face your worst moments to find your best ones. One evening, Adrian and I sat on the couch after dinner. The sun had just set, and the sky outside our window was a soft blend of gold and blue. He reached for my hand. "Do you ever think about him?" he asked gently. I didn't lie. "Sometimes," I replied. He nodded. "Do you still love him?" I paused. "I think I loved who I was when I was with him, but it wasn't meant to last. You and I, we have a lifetime of history. We just forgot how to live in it." He didn't let go of my hand. "I'm glad you told me, even if it broke something, because now we know what we're rebuilding." I smiled. Not a wide, dramatic smile, just a real one, the kind that comes after a long storm. Now, months later, I still carry everything that happened with me. Not as a shameful secret, but as a reminder of what can happen when we stop speaking, stop seeing each other, stop being honest. Emil was never a villain, and I wasn't just a woman who strayed. We were two people trying to feel something real. But the story didn't end with betrayal. It didn't end with broken glass or slammed doors. It ended with truth, and from that truth, a new beginning. I wake up each morning next to Adrian, not out of obligation, but out of choice. We still have hard days. We still stumble. But now we talk. We look each other in the eye. We listen. And I've learned that sometimes the strongest love isn't the one that never falters, but the one that survives after it does. That's my story. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And it changed everything.